The name's Bourne. Jason Bourne. How you guys doing out there? My name is Kyle, and I'm finally going to be talking about the Bourne Ultimatum, which is directed once again by Paul Greengrass and stars Matt Damon as assassin Jason Bourne. And just as a brief heads up, as always, guys, this review will definitely contain some spoilers, so if you have not seen the Bourne Ultimatum, definitely watch this film and come right back to this review. This movie begins right after the events of the Bourne Supremacy because Jason Bourne is obviously very injured because he of course got shot by Carell in the previous film and he's running away from the police. In this movie, Jason Bourne is once again suffering from his flashbacks. He's remembering how he joined Treadstone. He's remembering himself getting tortured, but he doesn't know who he is still. And this time, he's up against a brutal, ruthless CIA agent played by David Strathairn. For me, the Bourne Ultimatum rivals the Bourne Supremacy as my favorite Bourne film. And I think these movies really are neck and neck because I love them basically the same. Matt Damon once again shines as Jason Bourne. He really owns that role. For anyone who's ever doubted Matt Damon could have been Jason Bourne, they have been proven wrong 3 times. Bourne then discovers that a reporter named Ross has uncovered a program called Blackbriar, which is basically the next level up from Treadstone because they thought Treadstone failed. The actor playing Ross is actually the guy that plays Steve from The World's End. I recognized him immediately. I was like, oh my god, that's actually Stevie from The World's End. Another great actor in this movie is Daniel Bruhl from Inglourious Basterds and most recently playing Zemo from Captain America 3 Civil War. And I really love the scene where Bourne sits him down and apologizes to him that Marie's dead. This scene actually emulates the ending of the Bourne Supremacy where he apologizes to that young girl because Marie is the only person that Bourne's really ever cared about since he became an assassin. And it just makes it that much more powerful. This leads to a great scene at Waterloo Station. I mean, this scene was phenomenal. The way it's paced, constructed, concludes, everything about it is just great. There really isn't any problem I have with this scene at all. And what I really love about it is that Bourne purchases a prepaid phone and somehow just slips it into Ross's pocket. I just love the secrecy of it. And I love how the agents are just wondering, how the hell did he get a new phone? Just like the Bourne Supremacy, all the little gadgets and tech that Bourne uses can be found anywhere. He uses phones, SD cards, things that are totally plausible and realistic. And that's what helps give the audience the most grounded, realistic approach to any Bourne film. Joanne Allen gratefully reprises her role as Pamela Landy, and this is my favorite outing for Pam. I love the fact that she finds out that Bourne really isn't the enemy and decides to actually go meet him. And I love the scene when they meet face to face because she realizes he's not the bad guy. He's someone I need to help in this situation. And I really like the fact that she actually defies the CIA because in that moment, this is a completely different outlook for the character because what we saw in the Bourne Supremacy was someone who was always willing to get the job done. She wouldn't think any differently of the person. If she had to take out someone, she was willing to do that. But in this movie, she really has a change of heart, and I really like that change. It's a great dynamic for her character. Once Bourne discovers more about Blackbriar, he discovers that he has to go after a man named Daniels, but not before once again reuniting with Nikki, played by Julia Stiles. This scene is built with great tension because we don't know what Nikki's going to do. We don't know if she's going to call it in and say, Bourne's right in front of me, he's got a gun pointed at me, or if she's actually going to lie, which is what she does. And I thought that was really cool because behind the scenes you discover that there was actually a budding romance between Nikki and Bourne.
It was difficult for me. With you.
Something I really liked is once they head over to Tangier, there are a couple of scenes that really remind us of the Bourne identity. Like, for instance, the restaurant scene where Bourne's trying to explain things to Nikki, and the scene after the brutally awesome fight that I'll talk about once Nikki washes off her hair, and her hair looks exactly like Marie's did in the first film. I really like that there's a lot of similarities between the two characters as well, because Nikki's not a trained professional killer. Now, before I talk about the fight scene, I want to talk about the sequence that happens right before that. The entire chase sequence through Tangier. This sequence, I think, is going to be very controversial for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to love it because the cuts are so fast and swift that it's just like, wow, we feel like we're right there with the characters. And then there are going to be other people that think, this scene was a little bit too shaky. And I think that's where I fall, because while this scene has a very, very in-the-moment feel, you have this feeling of tension, fear, and suspense, I do think at times it gets a little bit too shaky and incomprehensive. There were many moments in the scene where I was blinking my eyes constantly, and there were also many moments where I had no idea what was going on with each take, because it's not only cut very fast, but there really isn't a great range of sound effects to keep us in tune with what's going on, like the further fight scene. But now we finally get to the fight between Bourne and the Blackbriar agent that starts with one of the best stunts of all time. And now we come to the fight scene. This is an amazing, badass fight that has awesomeness written all over it. This is amazing because Bourne's going up against an agent who's at a higher level than he is, yet he actually wins. There are two little things I'd like to address in this scene. The first thing is that obviously the punching sound effects have returned, and while some people might think that's nitpicking, those sound effects do kind of irritate me. But it didn't really irritate me as much because they didn't sound as computerized as the first movie. That being said, they're still present in the scene. And the second thing is this fight has an insane amount of cuts. It has a ton of cuts. Now, there's one little shot that many people take for granted because a lot of people are going to think, you know, how he punches the guy in the face with the book. But there's one shot right before that where he actually punches the book into the guy's throat. That shot is brutal. This leads to the breakup between Bourne and Nikki, which is kind of upset because we don't see Nikki until the ending of the film. But this scene is very important because Bourne tells Nikki that she has to stay low because he promised that to Marie in the first movie and she ended up getting killed, and he doesn't want the same fate to happen to Nikki. And I think that's a very smart decision by Bourne. It's him really thinking and caring about others, because without that compassion, he really is just an assassin who wants to kill people. But you realize that Bourne is a human being. He's a person. He's someone who has feelings and emotions. So once Pam finds out a little bit more information about Treadstone, she receives a special call from Jason Bourne. Now, when I was rewatching this movie, I felt as though I heard this exact same speech before, and this is actually the last thing that Bourne says to Pam at the end of the Bourne Supremacy. This then leads to a conversation between David Strathairn's character and Bourne, which leads to my favorite line of the entire film.
If you were in your office right now, we'd be having this conversation face to face.
I'm telling you guys, when I heard that line, chills just ran down my spine because I totally forgot about that line, but once Bourne said it, I realized, that's right, he says that line. Following this, I was delighted by something I didn't remember as well. The theme from the apartment fight in the first movie is back again. And when I heard that theme, I was like, is this the same theme? It is. This then leads to a pretty awesome car chase that actually rivals Supremacy's car chase towards the ending of that film. Now take a very close look at the way Bourne's car is positioned before he gets in the crash. It mirrors the exact same position Kirill's car was in when he got killed in Supremacy. I also really like the fact that even though Bourne's car got smashed and he could have gotten killed, he decides not to kill the CIA agent. I like that because it not only shows that Bourne is really a true person at heart, but the agent also realizes Bourne has humanity. So everything comes crashing down once Bourne finally meets his maker, literally, who is played by Albert Finney. Thank goodness. I love Albert Finney. He's a great actor. His voice is really awesome and distinct. This is where we find out that Bourne actually not only volunteered to be in this program, but that he actually had to kill a man with no hesitation. You really feel sorry for the character of Bourne because he actually doesn't want this. He doesn't want to be an assassin when he realizes that's really who he is.
From now on, you'll be known as Jason Bourne.
So this then, of course, leads to that final scene on the roof where the agent that was supposed to kill Bourne now is pointing a gun at him. He turns to him and he says,
"Do you even know why you're supposed to kill me?"
And listen very closely to Bourne's last line in the movie, because it emulates the last words Clive Owen's character said in The Bourne Identity.
Look at us. Look at what they make you give.
Then Bourne, of course, falls into the water, and of course he's not dead, because why would he be dead, right? But what I like is that particular shot emulates the opening of Bourne Identity. And I love that smile on Julia Stiles' face when she realizes Bourne's alive, because they couldn't find his body. So guys, as you already know, I love The Bourne Ultimatum. I think this is a great movie, and at times it is my favorite Bourne movie. At times I think I like Supremacy a little bit more. So guys, like with every Bourne review, let me talk about my 2 or 3 little tiny problems I have with the movie, because there are problems I do have with every Bourne movie. My first issue is of course the Tangier scene that I promised I'd address here. I do think it's a little bit too shaky for my taste. And I realized that Paul Greengrass really was trying to make this look like a documentary the best he could. But I do think that at times it was a bit incomprehensible to see what was going on because there really wasn't a lot of sound effects and it was just a lot of running around. Of course, guys, those punching sound effects, I personally feel bad saying that because it's such a tiny little nitpick, but it does irritate me from time to time. Now, my last issue of this movie revolves around the scene where Pamela Landy gets the call from Bourne, because this scene is taken straight from the Bourne Supremacy's ending. Now, when I talked about the Bourne Supremacy, I said at the end of that review that they had no intention of making a third Bourne movie, but when the Bourne Ultimatum was actually greenlit, they had to scramble to find out exactly how to put that scene in the movie. I think they really did a good job trying to recreate the entire scene, even though there were a couple of things that when you go back and watch the end of the Bourne Supremacy, some things in the background aren't the same. But when you really think about the dialogue of the scene, particularly the way it ends in Supremacy, it feels like a cheap way just to add on to the Ultimatum's runtime, and I felt like that was kind of a cheap way to set all the events in motion. But I have to say, guys, rewatching this trilogy was an absolute blast. I had so much fun rewatching all three of these movies. The Bourne trilogy is now my third favorite trilogy of all time, right behind Lord of the Rings is number 2, and of course Star Wars is number 1. But in terms of favoritism, my favorite is the Bourne Supremacy, but the best one is without a doubt the Bourne Ultimatum. So guys, I'm gonna give the Bourne Ultimatum a solid A. Alright guys, that's it. All that's left is Jason Bourne next week. I am so excited for that movie. How excited are you guys? I'd love to hear all those comments, so send them in the comment section below. And guys, thank you so much for watching my Bourne trilogy. I had so much fun reviewing all three of these movies. These are great movies, and I wish we had way more of them. Guys, thank you so much for watching as always, and stay tuned.